Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. You are now joining Kelley Nimero on the podcast. Kelley is the founder of Wellness by Kelley. She is a certified holistic health coach, certified nutrition coach, and Pilates instructor. Through mindfulness, plant-based eating, connecting to your purpose, and low-impact movement, you will transform to become the most beautiful, vibrant you. Love that tagline. Thank you for coming on, Kelley.
Thank you so much for having me, Jake. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I love talking with people who have some sort of professional attachment to health and exercise. I went to UNLV for kinesiology.
Oh, nice.
So that's also
awesome.
one of my foundations. I grew up as a big fat kid and then lost a bunch of weight.
I can't even picture you. Like, that is insane.
Add some long hair to it too.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. You've come a very long way if that's the case.
I appreciate that. I didn't know what I wanted to do in college. So my kind of tagline was like, well, I don't know what to do, so I might as well major in myself. I felt like that was like the most practical use to this sort of knowledge. And it's something that's ever evolving. But when you understand you and how you work internally and mechanically, you just feel so much more purpose in your life.
Oh my gosh, that awareness, being aware of your thoughts and your daily habits, it's what can transform you to finally like feeling good again. And I think that's something that every college or even elementary school should start teaching kids, is how to become more aware of being in their body. And I think that's really cool that that's how you looked at college. That's awesome.
Right? They need to update these PE classes and they need to add nutrition to it, because nutrition's like 80% or even more of feeling some sort of like gratifying wellness in your life.
What you put in is what you get out.
Yeah. It's just like gas, right?
That's
like
right.
you don't put unleaded gas into a premium car.
That's right.
You're just going to completely ruin it.
That's right. 100%.
So I'm interested about your past, because as for most people who generally get into some sort of health and wellness profession, you usually don't start with that. It's usually some sort of evolvement into it or some sort of epiphany or something like that. So let's just start with we'll go to the beginning and we'll work our way up to it.
Okay.
What was your childhood like? Did you grow up in Vegas? You mentioned college. What brought you out to college, and was that the same as what you're doing now?
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up here in Vegas. I was born and raised here. My family's in the casino industry. So I spent, my nights going to dinners with my dad, like meeting him at work because he worked in a casino. And my mom would take us down there, me and my brother and sister, and we would like meet my dad for dinner, and then he would go back to work and we would go home. And it was like, honestly, casino restaurants were like my second home. That was my childhood. And it was great. I had a really great childhood. It was awesome. And then I applied to USC, and I went there for college. And as soon as I left home, I started to struggle with an eating disorder. And I think it's kind of common for women these days. A lot of young women deal with body dysmorphia and body image issues. And for me, it was trying to be perfect all the time, because I had this, and it's not my parents' fault, but I had this pressure from my family that I wanted to live up to, and I wanted to be perfect for them. And then I dealt with a lot of bullying in high school, and girls saying mean things about me and my body. And so I tried to make it smaller, and I tried to control it with food and exercise. And honestly, for the longest time, nobody knew, because my body looked really normal in comparison to other girls who you see who have like anorexia or something that are like 100 or 95 pounds. Like I was still probably like 115 pounds, and everyone was telling me that I looked great. And so I was like, I'm going to keep doing this. Like I'm going to not eat food and I'm going to exercise 3 times a day, which was like the most unsustainable thing, because the worse it got, the more my hormones started crashing, and I was just holding on to this weight. And I was also at the time in college going out and binge drinking all the time.
Oh, yes. I remember those days.
Right? Yeah. And so it was like the only calories that I would allow myself to have, which is so sad. I look back on this girl with so much love, but the only calories I would allow myself to have were alcohol. And then I would like not eat anything all day long. And like before a game day, I would like find myself on the elliptical for like an hour and 15 minutes so that I could go and have, 10 shots of vodka. It was just like this vicious cycle that was so unhealthy. And from there, my hair started falling out. And like I said, I gained a bunch of like resistant weight because my thyroid started malfunctioning. My cortisol levels were jacked up. And yeah, I was this really unhealthy version of myself. I was exhausted all the time because I was trying to keep up with my schoolwork. And then once I got into the work world, I realized like, this is not sustainable. Like I can't go to work and have to work out, 2 times a day or like for 2 full hours. And when I would be eating lunch with people, they'd be like, oh, do you want to get a sandwich? And I'd be like, oh no. And like go do my own thing. And it was like, people were starting to notice that something was off, and I would like take a nap at my desk. It was just awful. And so finally, I got my hormones tested and I saw all of my lab values out of range. And I was like, I have to make a freaking change. And from there, I started doing a lot of my own research. And over the last, I would say 6-7 years, I was on my own journey. And through that, I was actually in New York for a minute, getting my MBA, but also trying to heal my own hormones. And then as soon as I got back here and I was working for my family's business in a casino, I had this epiphany one day that was like, part of feeling good is fulfilling some sort of purpose. And that to me meant like helping other people, because I knew what I had went through. And I was like, there are definitely other people out in the world that are going through the same thing. I've heard so many stories of so many women who are going through life overwhelmed and anxious and living in a body that they don't love. So from there, I went to go get a health coaching certification. And after all of the years of schooling, an MBA and everything, that's what I use in my everyday life. And then this year I was certified as a Pilates instructor. So I do that as well with my membership program. So that's kind of where I'm at. Any questions like on that long drawn out story?
Isn't it funny how the majority of our generation, we go to school for some sort of specific degree, and nobody I've had on here actually applies that to their professional life. We just decide that there's something else that's more fulfilling. Because I think in the traditional college model, it doesn't seem to stay up to date with what's evolving in society. And in today's world, the majority of people are able to brand themselves and profit off of it based off of your interests and passions. And when you go through a college model of, going for kinesiology or business, it's just like, it's so basic and rudimentary. It's hard to really apply that to your everyday life.
Yeah. I think unless your passion is like finance and you want to go and be a banker, or you want to be a doctor, honestly, I think that the world of college is going to blow up a little bit in the next coming generations. It's going to be a lot different in what we see, because exactly like you said, it's like you can absolutely explore your passions and deliver upon them without having to take, history of women, cultures,
history
whatever.
of rock and roll.
Yeah.
That was a UNLV class.
Exactly.
And now with the internet, you have the Library of Alexandria in your hand. You could literally Google anything. Everything I learned for this podcast was straight through YouTube, 95% of it. It's so cool that we're all teaching each other for free.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And I know your model is mostly through the digital space, right? It's a lot of remote coaching and remote working out. That seems to be catching fire. I've had so many people on who've transitioned to this model, and I was kind of skeptical of it at first. It didn't seem like it had that type of human connection and intimacy, but it seems to be panning out well for a lot of people.
Yeah, I definitely think with my one-on-one clients, it is so intimate. That's the most connection that I create with people, and I get to literally know their everyday habits, down to the detail. And I think part of it is because I only will see them on Zoom. We don't do phone calls. I want to look at you face to face, and I want to see your reaction to the deep questions that I'm asking you and really gauge how you're feeling about certain situations, because a lot of the work I do is with like I said, daily habits. Okay, what are you doing when you first wake up? Are you going to have, a green juice? Are you going to have a breakfast that balances your blood sugar. But then a lot of the work I also do is like, okay, where is your value coming from? And why do you feel like you have to be binge eating? Or why do you feel like you have to be restricting food? Do you feel like that is what's making you valuable, is the way that you look to your husband, boyfriend, friends, etc.? So getting to see the reaction on people's faces as we work through that stuff. And it gets emotional sometimes. But like Zoom is the best thing ever because they've allowed us to do that from remote places. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. The one aspect that I didn't account for is when you're doing Zoom conversations, we'll just use that platform. The person you're talking with, they're in their safe space as you're in your safe space. So they actually feel more comfortable because you don't have to go out of your home and where you feel most attached with your personal belongings and the food that makes you comfortable and your dog or cat or whatever it is. That's something that I really didn't account for. So
true. I seriously think that's a big part of it. People being able to do this like deep emotional work. It's like all in the comfort of your own home. I love it. Yes.
So as I went through this cool, awesome tagline in the beginning, you base your coaching off mindfulness, plant-based eating, purpose. That's very important to our generation, and low impact movements. I was really caught on by low impact movements. That's not a buzzword that I see pop up that often. What gravitates you towards this specification? Okay. So everything that I teach, whether it's in my membership program or my one-on-one coaching platform, is all, first of all, my one-on-one coaching is really like focused on a specific person's goals and their specific imbalances. So we do a lot based on what their needs are. But for most women, I find that low impact movement is so important because we run on a 28-day cycle, whereas someone like you, a man, runs on a 24-hour cycle. Your testosterone, it's just going on one 24-hour cycle, whereas our hormones, estrogen and progesterone, are fluctuating throughout the month. And during the month, you need different things. And I found that like when I was burning out my body, like doing those high intensity workouts was when my hormones were crashing and they were at their very worst. And I was feeling my worst when I was actually like my heaviest when I was working out twice a day. And it's because our bodies are so much more than a calculator, especially like women's bodies. It's not just calories in, calories out, like we think like a machine would be. And that's what most people are taught to believe. But when you take the time to actually tune in and listen to your body and what it needs and be a little bit more gentle with it, I find that most of my clients have seen, like I had a girl tell me last week, I had 7 pounds come off in the last 2 weeks since I've seen it, because I see clients every 2 weeks. And I'm like, what have you been doing differently? And she's like, I'm not doing those intense cycling classes anymore. I'm just doing like Pilates and going for walks. And I'm like, see, when you're a little bit easier and softer with yourself, I think we live in this like masculine run society where it's like everybody thinks that you have to go, go, go and be so hard on yourself all the time. But definitely for women, if we're just a little more gentle with ourselves, I think that's when you really see the results. And for me, that was when I started doing yoga and Pilates. I started to notice like, oh, wow, like my body's looking longer and leaner and more toned and defined. And I'm also not restricting all my calories anymore. So it all kind of happened at once. And that's the philosophy that I tried to teach, is that we're so much more than a calculator. But then when you were talking about, purpose and plant-based eating or mindful eating and mindfulness, I think it all goes together. Those are all of the things that have allowed me to come back to my body, to connect with myself, and to really feel like I'm thriving rather than surviving. Because for so many years, I guess like it would be from the time I was like 18 to 23, so like 5 years. And then like, it took a while to get me to where I am now. So 5+ years, I was like exhausted all the time and like just had the worst, most negative thoughts about myself and was just in a really bad place. So I don't have space for that anymore. It's all about thriving. I got a baby to take care of. And mindfulness is very important. Our society is just evolving at an exponential rate. Yeah. The technology is exponential. The amount of information that we consume just becomes more and more. Different types of content is out there now. So sometimes it's hard to focus on yourself because you have expectations you have to live up to, you have to take care of others, and you don't really set time aside for yourself.
Right.
Like, and some other things that I have noticed becoming popularized is like the amount of sleep that you get too is like very important. For a long time, it was like you have to grind, you have to go to work for 8 hours, and then you need to go do your second grind for another 4 hours, sleep 4 hours, and it's not really like that. So that was a big misconception of reality.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, like, that's why I have clients, right? Like, I think a lot of people still live by that notion that it's like, oh,
Oh, you're all good.
Yeah, I think a lot of people still live by that notion that where they're like, I have to go and do all of these things, and there's no prioritization involved. It's just everything is just as important, and that is what leads to that adrenal burnout, that leads to the hormone imbalance, that leads to that chronic fatigue. And it's like, if you had a meeting with somebody else, is what I tell a lot of clients, like if you had a meeting scheduled with someone else, like would you cancel that like 5 minutes before? No, you probably wouldn't, unless it was like a real emergency. So why would you cancel a meeting with yourself? You're the most important person in your life. So that's how I really get people to start looking at meditation. It's like, okay, you are your number one priority, and you need to be in connection with yourself to make more empowered decisions throughout the day. And that's where it starts. That's where like slowing down starts, is just by committing to yourself and showing up for your practice every single morning.
It is so true. As esoteric as it may sound, reality is really a one player game, right? Mm-hmm. It's when you're on your deathbed, it's you there. You know, you're surrounded by your loved ones, but you're the one that made all those decisions that led you up to that place. So it is important to slow down and understand like what social pressures are being placed on you, and you can't do that unless you cut out a lot of the fluff.
All the outside noise. We are constantly surrounded by everybody else's opinions and thoughts of what we should be doing and what we should be eating. Like, that's why everyone's on a diet, like, for God's sake, like, or everyone's doing a workout regimen that somebody else told them to do. But like, when you tune in to yourself in the morning, you're able to make more connected choices throughout the day. Like, oh, does a piece of avocado toast and a big green salad, that what makes me powered through my afternoon and not in a slump? Like, absolutely. Or like, I deal with so many people, for example, who have this fear of fruit. And like, they're like, I'm like, where did that fear come from? And they're like, well, all of these different diets told me that it has too much sugar. And it's like, you're listening to all this noise come in from the outside world, but what's true for you? That's what I agree with you 100%.
I've always told people, have you ever seen someone get fat off of eating just fruit? Like, it never happens. It's part of the we'll call them the big food companies' propaganda, as they were pushing carbs for such a long time.
Yeah, no carb diet.
Yeah, turns out carbs are actually not as good for you as people think, and fats are really important. Fat doesn't actually make you fat as long as you're
I think
active.
Whole foods are where it's at, right? Like, it's like we're all so conditioned to think that like this protein bar is what's going to make us. It's like, no, like, let's go back to eating real food. That's what's going to nourish your cells and really like have you thriving. That has antioxidants and micronutrients and vitamins and minerals. Like, so many people are like, oh, I'm just going to eat like, this processed junk that they find in the frozen section. And it's like, because it has a certain amount of calories. And it's like, no, we all have to get away from that idea.
Was self-experimentation with different food groups and diets what led you to a plant-based diet?
Yes. So I tried everything. I tried it all because I was that girl, like I told you, that I wanted to lose 5 pounds, and or the last 5 pounds, like for like 5 years of my life. And I would do every cleanse, every diet, paleo for like years. And I wasn't finding that I was getting any sort of results. And as soon as I started incorporating more plants, because I used to really struggle, like I told you, with my energy levels, but also like my skin was really broken out. My digestion was awful. I lived in this constant state of bloat. And I grew up in an Italian family where like we had cheese and meat at almost every meal. And so going to plant-based was like, and they were like, what the hell? What are you doing? And I just immediately noticed that it was working, and that my skin started to clear up, that I started to feel more energized, that I started to not be so bloated. Like I remember my husband and I were in an apartment in downtown LA like 10 years ago, like playing house together before we ever actually lived together. And he was taking these photos of us and my new puppy. And I was like 20 years old and I looked like I was 6 months pregnant. And he even said something and I was just like so ashamed, and he meant like no harm, but he was like, whoa, your stomach, like it looks really full. And I was like, oh my God, like I got to do something different. Like I said, as soon as I started eating plant-based was when I finally started to see a change. And I think it's because it's whole food that comes from the earth, and plant-based and vegan are so different. Like vegan, like is all the processed soy and all, like you can have all of that stuff. And I don't find myself eating that at all. It's really whole foods as much as possible. And then like lately I've been trying to really ditch the labels. So like if I, feel like I'm craving a piece of fish, like I just let myself have it, because like you got to live your life. And I find that I have so much more enjoyment from food and so much more nourishment from food, just letting my body intuitively guide me to what feels good.
That's when you were really tapped into the present. You're understanding what your body wants and what you're craving, not putting that box around you.
Yeah.
Like humanity becomes very tribal in whatever we do.
Yeah.
Whether it's the political party we want to affiliate with or the diet that we want to, entangle ourselves with. But it shouldn't really be like that. A labelless society is where we can prevail and push each other forward.
Oh, 100%. When you take off the labels, like it's just like you have the freedom to be whatever you want to be in that present moment. And I think that, even for so long, like up until this past year when COVID hit, like I was like, I'm plant-based. And then now I'm just like, I'm doing what feels good. And like, of course, like for the most part, 99%, like 98%, that's what I eat. But if I'm feeling something else, I go with it.
Yeah. I'm also like you. I've experimented with almost every single diet there is out there.
Yeah.
I did when I was in college, I did keto for like up to 9 months a few times.
How'd that go?
I loved keto. It's just, it's not the practicality of living a normal life is not sustainable at all. It's tough. So now I do more of like an intermittent fasting diet.
Okay. Yeah. I think that works well for men.
It works well for us. And I'm also like you, where it's not like a specific 16-hour fast, 8-hour on. I've listened to my body. Some days it'll be 12 hours. Some days it's 20 hours. You just have to understand what you're feeling.
Because we go through these different levels of stress day to day. We go through these different cycles of like, oh, I worked out harder this day. Like you never know, like your body's going to need different things every single day. So I'm a big believer in that. But I think the whole intermittent fasting thing, absolutely, my husband does it. And I think it works really well for men because like we were talking about before, men run on that 24-hour cycle, whereas women, it's a little bit harsher on our body. So a lot of women will start to like miss their period or like not have their hormones be in a good place because they're putting too much stress on their bodies. And it's just like a lot of misinformation out there, I think, about the difference between how men and women handle things. Because it's like a society kind of tells us it's a one size fit all. If you want to lose weight, this is what you do.
Yeah. I think the common goal is that we need to understand what we need to prevent ourselves from doing. I know in dieting, the thing that we need to fight is inflammation.
Absolutely.
At least that's what causes a cloudy mind. I know dairy products generally cause inflammation.
Yeah.
And I'm a big longevity nerd. I personally want to live forever, so I gotta keep myself in pace with technology. And from the research that I've done myself and things that I've read, it seems like plant-based diet is generally catered towards people who are going to live a long time. Like in the Japanese culture, most of it's like plant-based. And then the animal proteins are generally for protein synthesis to, to be a little bit more bulky or more defined in tone. So it's like you have to understand which two directions you need to go into to satisfy your life that you're living.
Absolutely. And I think that like any of the research that you looked at, like, when they do those like blue zones, when they tell you like about the people on the earth that are living the longest, like you're talking about the like Okinawans in Japan, it's really like 80% plants. And then like they do a lot of fish or, and even like the people who live in Sicily, Mediterranean type of diet, like those are the people who are living the longest. A little bit of fish, good healthy fats, and lots of plants. So
yeah, processed foods are your enemy.
Yes, exactly. And that's like where America is so stuck. It's like we're on this like we live this grab and go lifestyle, and it's about actually like being more mindful. It doesn't have to be that hard. Like eating whole foods doesn't have to be hard. And that's what I think, a lot of clients I talk to are like, well, I don't have time to make all this food. And it's like, if you're prepared and you go into the week, like, okay, I've made some veggies and I took some time on Sunday to roast my veggies in the oven, and I, rinsed and drained some beans, and I made some brown rice, like things that you could make a good bowl with, or you make some like healthy pancakes or something like that are with bananas and oats and almond milk. You could literally make pancakes with 3 ingredients like that, and you prep them and you put them in your freezer. It's like you have all of these options available to you at your fingertips. And like most people, even if you are going into an office, you can throw that in a little bag, or if you're working from home, you can walk downstairs and throw together a bowl and pop an avocado on top of it. And it's like, it does not have to be this thing where you're going through a drive-through or grabbing a protein bar. If you're prepared.
Yeah, it's really so bad. Mm-hmm. With your clients, do you see that's like the main assistance that they need is with their right nutritional balance?
So, it's funny that you asked that. A lot of my clients will come to me and say, I like that, exactly what you just said. Like, I want help with like nutrition or losing weight. And it starts that way, and then it evolves into this deeper thing of, okay, why do you want to lose the weight that bad? Like, where is that mentality coming from? Because I find most often that when you have this mindset of I need to lose weight, that's when the weight doesn't come off. But when you shift your mindset to like, I just want to feel good in my body, and I want to set up these habits that are going to allow me to do that are sustainable, that's when all like these people's weight falls off. And it's about like just whatever you resist persists. So it's about like letting go of that resistance and finding out where that's coming from. So we get into some really deep conversations, but yeah, most of it starts as like, I want to lose weight. I need help with nutrition. I feel really tired. My hormones aren't balanced, those types of things.
Sounds like it stems almost into like a pseudo therapy session on top of it as well. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Not everyone, you don't need this certain therapy license to just talk to somebody and be really real, because sometimes people don't have that third party person to talk to with their issues. And if they say it out loud, then they realize what the issue is. And it's almost like a light bulb moment. And that's so genuine to see, is when you're talking with somebody and you help them or assist them with that like life epiphany.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we got there.
Yeah, it's so true. And like the thing is that like, it's not just about what's on your plate that is making you feel good as a human being. It's about your sense of fulfillment. It's about how you're moving your body. It's about all of that stuff. And like what you said, when you become aware of, oh, maybe like I'm not happy in my job, or like I have this eating disorder and I need help, and you say that out loud, it's like this weight has been lifted. I know that is how it was for me. Like once I finally said, I have an eating disorder and I need to get help. And I have this hormonal imbalance and I need to get a coach. That's when everything changed for me, because I was like open to receiving a different way of doing things rather than coming back to the unsustainable lifestyle over and over and over again.
What type of eating disorder did you have?
So I struggled with anorexia, like just all of the restriction. And then years later, that like not even years, probably like a year into it, it led to the binging, because there's only so long that your body can take that, right? It's like the restriction. And then it's like, holy shit, I need food. So I would be like, I can look back on this now and like, not laugh, but just like with so much compassion to that younger girl, look at it and say like, I thank God I went through this experience because I learned so much. But I would be like in my dorm room, I remember like on my birthday, and someone had sent me a dozen cupcakes, and I ate the entire box. No shit. Because I hadn't eaten in like an entire week. And then I felt so shameful and so awful about it the next day. And then I would like force myself to work out, and it was this vicious cycle until I finally asked for help.
No shame at all. No shame at all. Hey, cheat days are sometimes rewarding though. I'm a sucker for pink blocks and donuts.
I think you got to give yourself that stuff, because that's the only way to like really live your like and enjoy your life. You've got to just let things flow in and out and give yourself the foods that your body is craving.
Mm-hmm. I generally tell people too that I give health advice to that, every 7 to 10 days, give yourself a meal, or even a day if you need to, if that's what you required, especially if you're feeling burnt out.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I love doing the podcast. Every time I go into a conversation, I'm like, yes, I love it. But then afterwards, when I have to do like the post editing and I'm just like, fuck, I'm feeling burnt out. And like, I don't want to do this. And most of the time that's like a signal to me that I'm feeling tired. And so then sometimes I just literally force myself to just like chill and not do anything else.
Oh my God.
And it's hard with everything else going around you. People are messaging you, you're getting notifications on Instagram. Your parents are calling you, other people. They're like, come drink with me at Stoney's or whatever it is. And you're just like, I'm not doing anything.
Oh yeah. It's honestly, that was the hardest thing for me. It's something that I still struggle with. And I was actually like talking to my Instagram followers and community this weekend about is like that perfectionist mentality. Like I struggle, that was part of like where my eating disorder stemmed from. And then like something that kind of continued on past that, even as like I started my own business, like I always have to be doing something. Like I always have to be productive, and forcing yourself, I guess force isn't the right word, but like allowing yourself to rest and giving yourself that permission, because our bodies need that just as much as they do need like the doing and the fulfillment, and looking at rest as almost like a productive thing to do, because it sparks creativity and it just like allows for your body to heal and recoup for the next day. And I never really saw the value in that until I started my own business this last year. And I'm like, okay, I need this. And that's something I work with my clients on too, is like, I think so many women, especially like, I don't know why, but maybe it's just my husband, but I feel like men are so much better at being like, all right, I'm going to sit on the couch. And I used to get mad at him. I'd be like, you're sitting on the couch? Like, what? Like, you help me cook dinner, help me, take out the trash, whatever. And it's like, no, like it's so much more simple for men to just be like, I'm going to just chill. I worked all day and like, this is my time. And for women, like I said, in my practice, I work with them a lot on like, okay, what do we need to do to allow yourself to think that it's okay to just take a moment for you, and not have to be serving everyone else, because you can only be your best and be the best version of yourself when you take care of yourself.
So true. Yeah. I think with men are pretty good at suppressing our emotions. So we can like guilt just sit there and just gravel and build up for years and years before it even comes into fruition. Women, they know the guilt's there and you need to address it immediately as possible. So I think that's probably one of the big deterrents from it. Yeah. I do generally though, I feel like a guilty person. So like on my rest days, I try to do like low level activities that I feel like I'm still getting some sort of growth from. So like reading or research or something, just sitting down, chilling, or even like going and visiting my parents. I'm like, oh, I'm knocking two birds with one stone. I'm getting out and I'm out in the world. I'm getting some vitamin D. And then I'm also getting this like nutritious socialization aspect of seeing your parents, which is very fulfilling. And I know there's some sort of chemical reaction with seeing your parents as well. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know it's there. Yeah, no,
that's one thing I always tell my clients, like anyone who's like dealing with sadness or like just like mental exhaustion and burnout, like we talk a lot about socializing, because it's like one of the easiest free ways to kind of come back, reset your nervous system, and start to feel good in your body again. There's actually been research to show that. So I think that's so important. And so many people neglect it. It's like our society dictates to us that like doing and being productive is more important than like seeing the people we love or doing activities that we enjoy. And it's all important. It's all equally important. So yeah, I totally agree. That's one thing that we absolutely work on.
Right. They always say, you got to do it for the economy.
Yeah. And it's like, why Americans are the only people who work that way and function that way. And it's like, we got to get out of that mentality of thinking that we always have to be on and available to everybody, because that's where that burnout comes from.
Yeah. I have been trying to preach this model through the podcast too. Is like, now we're transitioning. I think COVID has been this accelerant towards a lot of these faulty social structures that don't need to be in place. So now we see like this mass migration to remote working and digitization of different industries, like for example, like the wellness industry, telehealth, all these different aspects are to it. And so as we migrate to this new age, I call it the creator economy or the internet age, whatever you want to call it, this 40-hour work week is basically ineffective because now you could work for yourself and you only need to put in, 4 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, whatever feels satisfactory for your output of living. Right. So we need to get away from this. And I think that's what causes a lot of guilt, is because we've been it's kind of been beaten into us that you need to have 40 productive hours throughout the week to feel like you're making a living. Yeah. And it's not like that anymore.
No, it's absolutely not. I feel so blessed that I've set up this situation where, I can work 2 days a week in the afternoons and, bring in income that's good for me and my family. And then the rest of the time, 1 day a week I'll spend creating content and creating new workouts and recipes and things like that for my members. So that's like a third day, but the rest of the time I get to hang out with my son, and it's just a lot more flexible than the work world has ever been. And that's one thing that I tell people all the time is if you have a job that you don't like, or you feel like you're unfulfilled, that can also bleed into making your digestion worse. And you don't even know it because your emotions are so tied to how you're nourishing yourself and how your body is digesting food. But if you are not fulfilled in your life, you have the opportunity to make a change, and you have the opportunity to make it flexible. And it seems like this scary, scary thing, but it doesn't have to be. And I know because I've been there. I was the girl who had that corporate job. I was doing the 9 to 5, and I love my family, but it just wasn't for me. And it was part of what was making me feel all of the anxious, overwhelmed, unhappy, poor digestion, et cetera, feelings that I was feeling. So there's a big thing of that. It bleeds into every area of your life, for sure.
It does. Our mental health is very important, and sometimes even more important than our physical health, because your body degrades over time. I believe it's after the age of 30, you begin to lose 1% of your muscle mass per year. But they've taken brain scans of people who are in their 70s and 80s, and it's almost exactly the same amount of output and brain activity. So you begin to, your brain capacity increases while your physical body decreases. So it's important to understand how your mind works and how your emotions release different hormones, which therefore acts on a different aspects of your body, and the way you eat too. There's neurons that are attached in your stomach area that are attached to your brain. So that's how you understand different things like that. And that's why sugar feels like a drug, where you just want to keep hitting it and getting more and more of it.
Yeah. It's the gut brain axis for sure. It all acts together. And like you said, that there is that vagus nerve that runs from your brain to your gut. And it's the biggest connection of all. You're feeling those happy hormones, or you're getting anxious based off of, what you're consuming. But your mindset is where it all starts. It's the way that you look at life, and your perspective on things is everything, and you get to choose that every single day.
Perspective is so important. And it's important to know that in times you have to pivot different perspectives based off of whatever your different reality is. A lot of times people get boxed in this one perspective of how life should be, and that's what they say. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again with expecting a different result. And literally all you have to do is just complete just little mindset shift, and your whole entire world would change because of that.
Yes, 100%. That is my biggest thing. And I think that is where I experienced so much of my growth, is when I started looking at things differently, and taking the time for a daily meditation practice, and taking the time to have that mindfulness. Because when I could shift my perspective and look at things differently, it was okay, I can choose this, or I can choose to keep doing things the same way and being overwhelmed, or I can choose to be more present, to be more aware of the foods I'm eating, to be in a job that I like. And even though those decisions were sometimes scary, it's knowing that you have the choice is everything.
Was that perspective switch brought on to you from somebody else, or was that just a realization internally?
That's funny that you asked that. So when I told you I had to ask for help, I started seeing a therapist. I started seeing my own health coach. And I started going to yoga, and yoga and my yoga teacher, who I still see every week to this day, even though like I'm a Pilates instructor myself now, I still feel like I need to connect with my own mentors. She is really the person who helped me understand that like we all have a choice in the way that we're looking at every different situation, whether it was my eating disorder or my job or whatever it was, and to slow it down enough to understand that, because I think that a lot of us go through life on autopilot, like you said. It's just like this, I'm going to keep doing things the same way because it's not working, but it's the way I've been doing it. And change is uncomfortable for people. That's one thing I have noticed, as even through my own experiences, but especially as a health coach. It has to be really digestible and broken down for people into small steps. And so like when I started working with my yoga teacher, Kristen, she would just be like, okay, how can you look at this one thing differently? Because we would do like one-on-one sessions and we would talk through the whole time. So she was like a therapist to me too. But when I work with my own clients now, I'm like, okay, we walk away with like usually 3 to 5 things for the next 2 weeks that they're going to do differently, because any more than that, it's just like, it's too much, and it's not sustainable. It's not, so it can be as small as like not adding like real sugar to your coffee, or choosing a blood sugar balancing meal in the morning, just like those things that will set you up for a day or like going to your meditation practice and not looking at your phone. Like really small changes are what lead to the big results.
It is. It has to be a gradual build up. Mm-hmm. It's good. It's important to set long-term goals, but you have to break the long-term goal into multiple small-term goals, whether it's Absolutely. Weekly, daily, monthly, whatever the right practice is for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Change is uncomfortable. That's about 3 years ago. I quit drinking and quit. I used to be a big party kid.
Yeah.
I used to go to festivals and do all kinds of drugs and drinking and all this stuff. And I
love it.
I got caught up in this night. Like I said, I worked at a nightclub before this. I lived at a fraternity house. I was just like always partying, and it was a bunch of different events that happened on top of each other. But I was just like, I realized that I was making a lot of these bad decisions and I was unhappy. And so some of the small changes I made is I went to my social media accounts and I unfollowed every single club, every rave, every person I had to do with partying, unfollowed it all, sold my TV. I went a little bit more extreme, sold my TV, and like started listening to podcasts. And I was like, okay, I need to completely change my life around if I want to be the success story that I had always envisioned. And so it began with those small different steps.
That is awesome. That is so crazy. Like, I swear, like, I think a lot of people need their hand held to do something like that. That's so cool that you did that by yourself. But I love that you said you unfollowed all of those different accounts, because I think that's one of the hardest things for people to do, is like, they feel like they're like emotionally attached to these certain people or accounts on social media. And it's like, if those things are triggering you to do behaviors that aren't necessarily loving towards yourself, I highly recommend that. Like, that's one thing that I tell people all the time, like, unfollow, like, because you can choose to follow people who lift you up and who you choose who fills your feed. So I deal with that a lot. And I think that's so awesome that you did that. That's great.
It is. I think 20 years from now, or maybe even 10 years from now, the way that today we view sugar being bad for your health, I think is going to be the way that we consume social media consumption. I think it's going to be very, very detrimental to it. So my numbers still have been going up since I've been doing the podcast, but now I'm a little bit more mindful of using it as a tool to create success and not just a user based off of just consumption.
Yes. I think that is so, like, that is exactly what the way I started looking at it when I started my own business too. It's like, okay, this is a tool for me to grow my business, but it does not have to be this thing that I'm sucked into where I'm scrolling mindlessly and wasting time and not in the present moment. because I mean, to be totally frank, like that is exactly what I used to do. Or I would think like, oh, well, if someone's posting this, then I have to post this. And it's like, dude, like that's exhausting, and what leads to that burnout. And like, that's why we see that the suicide rates among like the kids are so much higher nowadays. Like there's nothing else that's really that different besides social media. I actually watched a really good documentary for anyone out there who is more interested in this topic. It's called Fake Famous over the weekend. It's on HBO, and it's all about Instagram and like how people buy followers and buy likes, and none of it's really real. And then we all start to compare ourselves to these people who we think like have millions of followers, and it's like, that's not real. It's not.
It is a fictitious world. I actually had a social media guy on here recently. His name was Marcus Miller, and he was telling me how a lot of these accounts, like he did his own research, and he opened up during the podcast Kevin Hart's Instagram following, and he opened up his likes, and we went through literally the first like 20 people that liked the stuff, and it was all like fake accounts. It's all bots, and it's all fictitious. And some of the, he was telling me some of the ideals behind these bigger accounts are like, okay, if you fluff it up with fake numbers, then it'll drive real people.
100%, because people want, that's exactly what they were saying in this documentary. Like people want to follow people with a lot of followers. So like, cause they think they're famous.
It's weird. It's just like when you see something on Twitter, I don't know, do you use Twitter at all?
I don't.
Okay.
I probably should.
I'm a big Twitter guy. It's like, there's times people tweet stuff and you see a bunch of likes, or it's same on Instagram, and you just like that picture and you're like, I don't even know why I did, but you just wanted to join in on the fun.
Yeah. You don't even know like or like if there's somebody that you always like their stuff, you just like every single photo because it's like, it becomes a habit, and it's so weird how addicting it is. So I definitely try to be mindful about taking breaks from my phone. Like for example, I did, this past month, I did 3 or 4 days just completely off. I deleted the app, like done with it. And I still would see clients over Zoom and all of that, but like you realize how much time you get back. And it's not even me, like I don't scroll anymore. I've created that boundary for myself, like that I just don't really look at anyone else's stuff unless someone's tagging me in something. But even like creating the content, it's like you realize how much time you spend and how much time you get back. And I think it's important, whether it's a few hours or a few days, for whoever it is, just to separate yourself from it and just see how you feel. Because it makes all the difference in the world. You become like this much more present, involved person in your own life.
Did you feel any sort of anxiety the first day or few hours of deleting social media?
You know, the first time I did it, like about a year ago, yes. Like it was like, oh my God, like what if somebody like wants to, like join my membership or something and they can't figure out how to do it. And then it was like, no, like people are smart and intuitive. And like, if somebody really wants to like join my membership or work with me one-on-one, like they absolutely will. And then like, there was the anxiety too of like, oh, well, the algorithm is not going to put me back in people's feet. And it's like, dude, like my life and my time with my family and my son are so much more important and valuable than the Instagram algorithm. And people who want to see my stuff will, and if they don't, they won't. And that's the way that it is. And I just had to prioritize what was important to me. And the second that I did that and I became aware of it, because I think anxiety is this funny thing. It's just an emotion that's rooted in fear, right? And so when we become aware of what the fear is and we sit with it for a second, it's like, oh, okay, I can let that go. Fear of not being on someone's feed, like my family is way more important. And it's that simple.
Right. We put up these like mental barriers or obstacles all the time. And no matter what we want to do, whether we want to leave that 9-to-5 job or start a podcast or change our life. And we sit there and like I'm sure you probably sat on the idea for a long time. I sat on the idea of doing this podcast for like 2 years, and I don't know what was holding me back. I was like, people won't listen. I'm going to suck, blah, blah, blah. But once you finally step over that obstacle and you look back and you're like, should have never existed to begin with. Like I just wasted all my time thinking about all these like fearful things that could happen. And now I'm much happier on the other side of this fictitious obstacle.
Yeah. It's like everyone has that imposter syndrome when they first want to start something. It's like, oh, like no one will like take me seriously, or I should go get another certification or whatever. And it's like, no, start your dreams now. Like go, if you have this idea, whatever it was, I truly believe the idea was given to you because because you're the only one that can expand on it. You're the only one that can make it yours and make it exactly what it needs to be to serve other people in the world. So if there is something that you feel like is calling you, like act on it. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you're going to learn so many lessons along the way. I know I have, I'm sure you have with starting your podcast. But that's the fun of it. That's the journey.
I think one of the attributes that you need to overcome is feeling vulnerable, right? I did a few different business ventures before this, and coming into the podcast, I was like, okay, I'm going to suck at this. It's going to sound terrible, but I know that no matter what you do, you're going to feel vulnerable, right, and it's going to be bad, but you're going to grow. And then everyone who's watching or following you on whatever journey you're doing, they get to grow with you. Yes. And so they feel some sort of attachment and community because of it. Yes.
I love that. I think it's so true. And I think that that's what people are looking for these days is like realness and vulnerability, and like, we're all human. Like, we are all freaking human, and we all go through shit. And that whole like curated perfect vibe, whether it's an Instagram model or like, it's so over, it's so done. It's like people want to be in a community, whether it's listening to a podcast or following someone on Instagram or working with someone one-on-one, that's real. And like, that life is about like taking those lessons that you learn and growing from them, because you can't grow, I truly don't believe, without actually going through things. Like, you have to come out on the other side and take those challenges and make them your lessons.
Yeah, so silver linings. That's something that I preach on all this time. It's so important, because if you don't go through the failures, a lot of times there's people who say like, you can learn through other people's failures. But for me personally, I need to go through the failure because I need to know what emotions are attached to that failure.
Yeah.
And so that when that feeling comes around another time when I do something, I know how to manage it. And that's why I always go through and try to do these trial and error kind of mindsets.
Absolutely. Like the more that you allow yourself to sit with it and understand it and be like, oh, okay, this is what I learned from this, the faster you bounce back the next time, the faster you come back from whatever challenge it may be. So I totally agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Then it just becomes very normalized in your life. I love that you're talking about just being able to see everyone for who they are as a normal human being or a person. A lot of times, something that I hate is how we glorify a lot of these people in the world for whatever they're doing. Some people do deserve a lot of praise, but they put them on this like such high of a pedestal, and it's like you're just demonizing yourself, and you're like basically saying like you can never achieve that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Something I say on here is like, Joe Rogan's a role model for me, but I don't like being compared to Joe Rogan because I think that puts a box over what my ability can be. Obviously he's the ceiling right now. He's getting paid $100 million to do this.
Yeah.
But if you're comparing yourself to like, oh, this is going to be the next Elon Musk, or, oh, this is the Airbnb of that.
Yeah.
You're already putting yourself in this box of potential, and you're limiting your abilities.
So true. Oh my gosh. I could not agree with you more. Yeah. I think that you have to look at yourself as an individual, and what you have to offer is completely different than what everyone else has to offer. You have like unlimited potential. So
yeah, that's the world that we're living in, an individualized world where we get to represent our brand, and the people who have made it, I just like to call them, they're just people who have a cool job for the most part. That's how they've made it. And when I sit here and talk with different people, we're all leveled. We all share the same emotions. We all go through different troubles that, are hidden, that aren't on social media.
That's the biggest problem with it, is that people think that like, oh, if her life's perfect, like she's not going through that. So that's why I try to share, like, regardless of like having a great childhood and whatever, coming from like a good family that I came, like I still had an eating disorder. I still struggled. And so everyone goes through their shit. So
true. How do you communicate with your social media following? I know you have a decent amount of followers. What type of messages do you try to portray to them, and how do you communicate with them?
Oh gosh. So I do a lot on stories. I post in my feed. Some of it is just like, lifestyle, fluff, fun stuff. People getting to see my 1-year-old son, because I can't not share him. It's like spam. But a lot of it is me trying to go on there and be really open and honest. Like, hey, like if I'm talking about nutrition and blood sugar balance and, why I had this resistant weight for so long and how like balancing your blood sugar is what affects all of your other hormones, and like educating people. That's one thing I really try to do. And then another thing on the other side is like things that I'm still currently going through. Like if I had for example, last week I had a really like emotional end to my week. Something personal came up, and do I share exactly like what that personal thing was? No, because it's still something that I'm processing, but I do tell people, okay, like here's a breathing exercise that you can do if you find yourself in the same place. Because I think that we all go through that stuff. We all still none of us are robots, no matter how long you've been meditating for, or, feeling like good in your body, we still have situations come up that can trigger us. And so trying to like help people move through that is what's really important to me. I just want to give people value and let them know that what they're feeling is okay, and they're safe and they're whole.
It is true. I do kind of similar thing where you don't have to tell them the exact thing that's happening in your life, but you can still portray your emotions through there and guide people on how to tackle it.
Yeah.
And, some things, whether it's like the amount of money you made or a family member died or whatever the case is, they don't need to know those specific details, but they do want to share those vulnerabilities with you, so you can kind of give them a piece of it. And, it's almost like therapy a little bit as well. It's like they get to learn through you, and they get to feel a little bit more compassion and a little bit more like relatability with you through it. So that's a good way. That's a positive way to use social media and not just be some of these pessimists that you see on some of the other social media accounts.
Totally. Yeah. I think that just like me, the way that I look at it is like, what can I do to go on here today and like do good and have somebody else feel like they appreciate like whatever it is that I'm sharing. That's the place I always try to come from.
Yeah, it is great. You said that you love sharing your son. How has motherhood impacted your life and changed your perspective?
Oh gosh, like every single thing. He is number one priority. Nothing comes before my little boy. And I used to be the girl who was like, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want today. Sleep till, noon on the weekends, or, and it just like, it doesn't work. Or like, even like when I had my meditation practice before my son, I'm like, I have to get a meditation in first thing in the morning. And like, now it's like, dude, wherever I find the time, like as long as I get it in, like wherever I find the time. And so, yeah, it's definitely shifted my priorities, and it's not because of have to, it's because of like, as soon as you become a parent, you realize it's because of want to. Like, there's nothing I'd rather do. No one I'd rather spend my time with. Watching him grow is like the most fun thing ever.
Yeah, it seems to be very rewarding. A lot of my friends who have kids, I'm like, okay, I'll see you in 3 years.
Yeah.
Once you're a little bit older and you don't have to dedicate 24/7 to them to making sure they're okay. But I see a lot of them, it's generally enjoyment as long as they could get maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep.
Yeah, the sleep thing and when they're firstborn is rough. And that was like part of the reason, like what we were talking about earlier, like I realized like I needed to prioritize that. Like work and the people who on Instagram who follow me, like God love them to death. But like they're following me for free, and I do not have to like wake my ass up at 6 a.m. to talk to them about like a breathing technique. Like I need to actually sleep. So it's been a little bit about prioritization for sure.
Yeah, that is amazing. Motherhood is awesome. It changes, and fatherhood is as well. Yeah, it changes people. I had a friend who was on the podcast, and he had a son, and now his podcast is shifted towards fatherhood and like talking with other fathers. Yeah, his name's James Silva. It's called the Be That 1% podcast. And so I see it actually makes dramatic impacts. And, when we're younger, you don't realize the impact. You just think, oh, I want to have a kid, because I want to have somebody who inherits my genes and to see them grow up. But you don't understand the emotional implications and impact that it brings to you once they are born.
Oh yeah, it's insane. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And then the second he was born, it was like my life was turned upside down, but in the best way. Yeah.
And working from home makes it a lot easier,
it does.
Right?
Absolutely. I can walk around the corner from my office, and if he's up from a nap, like we get to hang out and it's so nice. I would not have it any other way. It's awesome. Even like if I did ever have, the potential one day to not be at home, I would not choose that. I love being there. Yeah.
As we finally figure out this COVID situation and as we can find some new normalcy, whatever the new is, do you see Wellness by Kelley changing in any way? Or are you going to continue on with the digital remote coaching?
Yeah, it will always be, I think, Zoom remote so that I can see people around the world. I have clients in Vegas, but I also have clients in California and, Florida and Texas, and people who come from my Instagram following come to see me, which I love. I think that it is such a blessing to be able to connect with people all over the world because, and that's one of the true blessings of social media is like, it connects us on a level that would not have been possible before. So absolutely, it'll always be on Zoom.
It's so true. Yeah. As long as you utilize it right. I remember reading on your website where in your about me, it's like, oh, you probably are already aware of me. You already know me through my website. Yeah. It's so cool. That's what brings us together. Like, I feel like we've known each other for so long.
Yeah.
It's just like been an hour and a few messages.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. That's why I like tell people like who, are having a consultation with me, like, call me Kel, like act like you've known me because I feel like I put my whole life out there. So, and it's nice to be able to connect with people like this, like to be able to come in here and have this conversation with you when we just met through, social media. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is amazing. Before we get out of here, I always ask one common question to everybody.
Okay.
So the question is, what does Las Vegas mean to you?
Oh gosh, Las Vegas means home to me. Home. It was where I was born and raised. It was, I left a few times to go to LA, to go to New York, and I feel like I'm getting like emotional right now. It's like every time I fly in here and I like see the strip, flying has been a lot less frequent with COVID, but like all lit up next to McCarran Airport, it's like this sense of pride like rushes over me. And even though I don't work in my family's business anymore and, I'm not involved in the casino industry, there's so much more to Vegas than that. And it's such a beautiful community, and to have watched it grow from the time that I was like born in 1990 to what it is now, like it is such a cool place. Especially like look at where you are down in the arts district. Like this place is awesome. It's so cool. So yeah, it's been a really cool thing to watch. I love living here.
It is. It is the best city. I say the most diverse city in the world. There's so much stuff to do out here. And the community, I feel like we are in this golden age of culture being built down here right now, where there's different bridges are being built outside of the strip. Different industries are moving out here. And I think by the end of the decade, Vegas is going to be something unrecognizable to today.
I totally do too. I think that like all of the, areas that there is to build out housing and stuff like that, it's definitely going to expand people. You see it already, like people wanting to come from California and all that stuff because like, yeah, the beach is great, but like there's hiking and biking and entertainment, and it's like you can get anything you ever want here. So it's awesome.
The land of opportunity. Where do I send all of the listeners and viewers to learn more about you?
You can find me on Instagram at Wellness by Kelley and on my website, wellnessbykelley.com. And if you want to join my membership program where I share workouts and recipes and meditations every single week, plus join our 30-day challenge, you can go to wellnessbykelley.com/memberships.
That will all be attached in the show notes. Kelley, thank you so much for doing this. I enjoyed our conversation. Fun. This was so amazing.
Thank you.
I look forward to following you on your journey and then doing this sometime again in the future.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for listening. We will catch you next time.